I remember the night I met Alex like it was yesterday. The art exhibit was buzzing with chatter, but he stood out, a beacon in a sea of monotonous small talk. His laugh was infectious, and when our eyes met, I felt a jolt of excitement, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. Paul and I had settled into a comfortable routine, the kind that makes you forget there are fireworks in the sky. But with Alex, it was like discovering a secret world where passion was the language. I hadn't planned on kissing him that night we went out for drinks. It just happened, a whirlwind of emotion and longing that swept me off my feet. I was drowning in his eyes, and for a moment, I didn't want to be saved. The lies started small. Working late, girls' night out, I'd tell Paul, my voice steadying over time. Each lie was a brick in the wall I was building between us. I knew it was wrong, but the thrill of sneaking around with Alex was intoxicating. It was like living in a parallel universe where I could be someone else, someone who wasn't just a wife in a sleepy marriage. Our weekend getaway was a blur of forbidden love. We drove to a secluded cabin, away from prying eyes. The world outside didn't exist. It was just Alex and me, wrapped up in each other. I remember lying there, listening to his heartbeat, thinking how dangerously easy it was to forget my reality. But reality has a way of crashing down. Each time I returned home to Paul, the walls of our house felt like they were closing in. I'd look at him, his oblivious smile, and feel a pang of guilt so sharp it almost made me confess. But I couldn't. The fear of losing that electric connection with Alex was too great. I knew I was playing with fire, but I couldn't help myself. Alex was like a drug, and I was hopelessly addicted. With every secret meeting, every stolen kiss, I was drifting further away from the life I had built with Paul. But in those moments with Alex, nothing else mattered. I was alive, and that's all I wanted to feel. Emily, we need to talk. Paul's voice cut through the usual evening calm like a blade. His eyes, usually so warm and trusting, bore into me with an intensity that made my heart race. I could tell he'd been turning things over in his mind, piecing together a puzzle I'd hoped he'd never complete. About what, Paul? I tried to sound nonchalant, but my voice betrayed a hint of nervousness. He moved closer, his gaze never leaving mine. It's just, you've been so distant lately. And all these late nights, they don't add up. His words hung heavy between us. I could see the hurt behind his suspicion, and it twisted my insides. But admitting the truth was not an option. Paul, you're imagining things, I countered quickly, too quickly. Work's just been crazy, you know that. I avoided his eyes, feeling the weight of my deceit. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, and our home, once a haven of love and laughter, felt like a battleground. I hated the tension, the secrets, but I couldn't pull myself away from Alex. He was like a magnet, drawing me in with a force I couldn't resist. Days turned into weeks, and the affair continued, each rendezvous more daring than the last. Then came the day Alex sent a bouquet of roses to my office, a bold, romantic gesture that set my heart racing. But it was a risk, a dangerous blurring of my two worlds. As I sat there, staring at the beautiful flowers, a part of me wished I could freeze that moment, live in that thrill forever. But reality has a nasty way of crashing in. The day Paul found Alex's gift hidden in my closet, I saw a side of him I'd never known. He held the small, elegantly wrapped box, his hands shaking with a mix of anger and heartbreak. Emily, what is this? His voice was a mix of confusion and dread. I was cornered, with nowhere to hide. It's just a gift from a friend, I stammered, my mind racing for a plausible explanation. A friend. The word was laced with skepticism. This doesn't look like a friendly gift to me. His eyes, once so full of love, now pierced through me with an icy accusation. I could see the trust we had built over years crumbling before my eyes. Lies were my only refuge, but even they felt weak and transparent now. Paul, please, you're reading too much into this. But the damage was done. The foundation of our marriage was cracking, and I was the one wielding the hammer. Yet, even as I watched the pain I had caused, a part of me longed for the next stolen moment with Alex, the next exhilarating escape from reality. It was a longing that both terrified and exhilarated me, a reminder of the chaos my heart had chosen. As I sat across from Alex in the dimly lit cafe, the words I had rehearsed over and over in my mind suddenly seemed to evaporate. His gaze was intense, pleading. Emily, we can't end this, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. What we have is rare. The determination in his eyes stirred something within me, reigniting the flame that I was there to extinguish. I can't do this to Paul, I stammered, my resolve wavering. But as Alex reached across the table, taking my hand in his, all my promises to end the affair melted away. I was being pulled back into the whirlpool of passion and excitement, and I couldn't resist its pull. Meanwhile, Paul, my husband, the man I had vowed to spend my life with, was taking advice from his friend about hiring a private investigator. I didn't know about it then, but looking back, I can't blame him. The signs were all there, and I was too caught up in my own deceit to see the pain I was causing. Juggling my double life became a taxing affair. With each passing day, my guilt grew heavier. I was living a lie, and it was tearing me apart. My mind was constantly racing, trying to keep my stories straight, ensuring that my two worlds didn't collide. But deep down, I knew it was a ticking time bomb. The day the investigator handed Paul the evidence of my affair was the day my world came crashing down. The photos, the detailed reports of my rendezvous with Alex, it was all laid bare. I could imagine the look on Paul's face as he sifted through the evidence of my betrayal. The trust we had built over the years, shattered in an instant. I was oblivious to the storm brewing at home. Every stolen moment with Alex was a moment stolen from my marriage. I was living in a fantasy, blind to the damage I was inflicting on the person who had stood by me through thick and thin. The guilt was a constant companion, whispering in my ear, reminding me of the web of lies I had spun. But even as it ate away at me, I couldn't bring myself to end things with Alex. The thrill, the passion, the escape he provided from my mundane reality. I was addicted, and breaking free seemed impossible. It was only a matter of time before everything came to a head. The lies, the deceit, the affair. It was all about to come crashing down, and I was utterly unprepared for the fallout. The life I knew, the life I had built with Paul, was on the brink of destruction, and I was the architect of its demise. The moment I decided to end things with Alex, it felt like I was walking away from a part of myself. I knew it was the right thing to do, but that didn't make it any easier. My heart was heavy as I made my way to his apartment, the scene of so many secret rendezvous. The memories flooded back with each step, making me second-guess my decision. But the image of Paul's face, hurt and betrayed, pushed me forward. Alex opened the door, and I could tell he wasn't expecting the news I was about to deliver. "I can't do this anymore, Alex," I said, my voice shaking. "I have to try and fix my marriage." He looked stunned, his face a mix of confusion and hurt. "But Emily, what we have is special. You can't just walk away from that," he pleaded. His words tugged at my heartstrings, and for a moment, I was tempted to stay. But the guilt of what I was doing to Paul was too much to bear. Alex grabbed my hand, his eyes begging me to reconsider. "Please, don't do this. I need you." His vulnerability was something I hadn't seen before, and it made my resolve waver. But I gently pulled my hand away. "I'm sorry, Alex. Goodbye." Returning home, I braced myself for the confrontation with Paul. I knew he was heartbroken, and the thought of facing him filled me with dread. But I was determined to make things right, to seek his forgiveness and rebuild what I had so carelessly destroyed. As I opened the door, Paul was sitting in the living room, a storm of emotions playing across his face. "We need to talk," he said, his voice heavy with pain. I sat down, ready to confess everything, to lay my guilt and remorse at his feet. "I know about the affair, Emily," he said quietly. The room felt like it was spinning. "I'm sorry, Paul. I'm so sorry," I stammered, tears streaming down my face. "I want to make things right." Paul looked at me, his eyes searching for the truth. "I'm willing to try and move past this," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I could see the hurt I had caused, the trust I had broken. He was willing to forgive, but the resentment was there, lurking beneath the surface. The days that followed were a delicate dance of trying to rebuild our relationship. Paul was kind, but there was a distance between us that hadn't been there before. I could feel him pulling away, retreating behind a wall of pain I had built with my lies and betrayal. I wanted to believe that we could get past this, that our love was strong enough to overcome the damage I had done. But as I lay in bed at night, listening to Paul's steady breathing, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were teetering on the edge of a cliff, and it would take only a slight breeze to send us tumbling down. Lying in bed, the silence of the night was my only companion. My mind was a whirlwind, trapped in a tug-of-war between the life I was trying to mend with Paul and the lingering thoughts of Alex. His laughter, the way his eyes lit up when he smiled, the electricity of his touch all haunted me. It was like a melody stuck in my head, playing on a loop. I tossed and turned, trying to shake off the memories, but they clung to me like shadows. One morning, a crumpled piece of paper slid under the door, breaking the monotony of my guilt-ridden days. I unfolded it, finding an anonymous note that sent chills down my spine. Watch your back. Paul's not as forgiving as you think. My heart skipped a beat. Could Paul be plotting some sort of revenge? No, that wasn't like him. He was hurt, yes, but revenge? I shook my head, dismissing the note as a cruel prank. But things around the house started to change. Paul, once predictable in his routines, began coming home late without explanation. His responses were vague. Just work stuff, he'd say, avoiding eye contact. I tried to convince myself it was just the stress of our situation, but a gnawing feeling in my gut told me there was more to it. Then there was Michelle, my best friend since college. She had been my rock through all the ups and downs. But suddenly, she was distant, her calls and texts less frequent. When I asked if everything was okay, she brushed it off. Just busy with work, she said, but her eyes darted away, hiding something I couldn't put my finger on. I felt like I was losing grip on everything. The walls of our home, once filled with love and laughter, now echoed with the sounds of my paranoia. Was Paul really plotting something against me? Was Michelle involved? My mind raced with these thoughts, clouding my judgment. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking on thin ice, and it was only a matter of time before it cracked beneath my feet. Each day became a game of pretense, a facade of normalcy while my mind raced with suspicions and fears. I'd watch Paul leave for work, his briefcase in hand, and wonder if he was really going to the office or somewhere else, plotting his revenge. I'd call Michelle, trying to gauge her tone, searching for clues that she was part of some plan against me. I was trapped in a web of my own making, entangled in lies and deceit. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had been the one to step outside my marriage, and now I was the one consumed by distrust and fear. But as much as I tried to shake these feelings, to focus on rebuilding my life with Paul, the shadows of doubt lingered, turning every innocent act into a potential threat. It was a tortuous existence, one where peace seemed like a distant memory, and every day was a battle against the demons of my own creation. Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the video so far. If you do, please take a moment to hit that like button. It really helps me out and lets me know you appreciate the content. Also, if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. Subscribing is a great way to stay updated with all the latest videos and to be part of our growing community. It's quick, it's free, and it ensures you won't miss out on any upcoming content. So go ahead, smash that like button and hit subscribe. Your support means a lot and keeps this channel going. Thanks for watching. I never thought I'd see them together, Paul and Michelle, my husband and my best friend, sitting across from each other in that cozy corner of our favorite cafe. The sight sent a cold shiver down my spine. They were laughing, their heads bowed close in a way that screamed, more than friends. My heart pounded against my chest as I watched, hidden behind a newspaper. Later that day, I confronted Michelle. What's going on with you and Paul? My voice was a mix of anger and hurt. She looked at me, her eyes wide with feigned innocence. Nothing, Emily. He's just been a good friend, especially with everything you've put him through. Her words stung, but her denial didn't convince me. Something was off, and it wasn't just my paranoia. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, Alex called. I miss you, Emily. Let's try again, he pleaded. His voice, once a siren's call, now sounded distant and foreign. No, Alex, I replied firmly. I need to fix my marriage. Ending the call, I felt a sense of resolve. Despite the chaos, I needed to mend things with Paul. But my world continued to unravel. One evening, while looking for an old photograph in our bedroom, I stumbled upon a hidden phone in Paul's drawer. My hands trembled as I flipped it open. The contact list was a string of unknown names and numbers. My mind raced with questions. Was this his way of getting back at me? A secret life in retaliation for my affair? Each discovery, each secret unveiled, was like a piece in a jigsaw puzzle of betrayal and deceit. The more I found out, the less I felt I knew Paul, the man I married. The foundation of our marriage, already cracked and fragile, seemed to crumble a little more with each passing day. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, the hidden phone burning a hole in my mind. The silence of the room was deafening, broken only by Paul's steady breathing next to me. I felt trapped in a labyrinth of lies and secrets, each turn leading to more questions than answers. The trust that once bound us together had frayed, leaving us both on edge, strangers under the same roof. When Paul suggested a romantic weekend getaway, it felt like a glimmer of hope in the gloom that had become our marriage. Maybe this is a chance to start fresh, I thought, trying to brush aside the nagging doubts and suspicions that had become my constant companions. As we drove to the countryside, the silence in the car was palpable. I tried to initiate conversation, but Paul's responses were curt, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. The man I once knew, who could make me laugh with a single word, seemed like a distant memory. The cottage was nestled in a picturesque setting, surrounded by lush greenery and the gentle sound of a nearby stream. It should have been the perfect escape, a chance to rekindle our love. But Paul's coldness cast a shadow over everything. His smiles were forced, his touches lacked warmth, and at night, he turned away, leaving a cold, empty space between us. Back home, the doubts that had been simmering in my mind boiled over. I couldn't shake off the feeling that there was more to Paul's behavior than just hurt and resentment. One afternoon, I decided to follow him. My heart pounded as I trailed his car at a distance, the streets blurring past. When he pulled up outside a cafe and Michelle joined him, it felt like a punch to the gut. They seemed so comfortable with each other, their laughter echoing across the street to where I sat, frozen. That evening, I confronted Paul. "Are you having an affair with Michelle?" My voice was a mix of rage and despair. He looked at me, his face a mask of surprise. "What? No, Emily, you're being paranoid." His denial was firm, but his eyes, once an open book, were now unreadable. I couldn't let it go. The pieces just weren't adding up. So, I decided to do some digging of my own. I started with the hidden phone I had found. I went through the numbers, calling each one, my heart racing with every dial tone. But the answers were elusive, the voices on the other end cautious and guarded. I scoured through our bank statements, looking for any unusual expenses or unexplained withdrawals. I checked his emails whenever I got the chance, my hands shaking as I searched for any clue that could shed light on what was happening. It was like living in a spy novel, except the stakes were my marriage, my happiness. With every piece of evidence I gathered, the picture became more confusing, more tangled. Was Paul really having an affair, or was I chasing shadows, my guilt and paranoia leading me down a rabbit hole? The uncertainty was agonizing. I missed the simplicity of our life before, the comfort of trusting and knowing each other completely. Now, every word, every gesture was laden with doubt. I was lost in a sea of suspicion, desperately trying to grasp at the truth that seemed just out of reach. The day I received the private investigator's report, my world came crashing down. The photos, the detailed accounts of meetings between Paul and Michelle, it was all there in black and white. The pain was indescribable, a sharp stab in the heart. I felt betrayed, not just by my husband, but by my best friend. I packed my bags in a daze, the fabric of our life together unraveling with each folded shirt, each packed photo frame. I was ready to leave, to walk away from the shattered remains of what I once believed was a happy marriage. But fate had other plans. As I was zipping up my suitcase, Paul walked in. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, his voice cold and distant. I confronted him about Michelle. His reaction was not what I expected. Instead of denial, he laughed bitterly. "I know about you and Alex," he said. The way he spat out Alex's name was like venom. My affair, which I had thought was my deepest secret, was out in the open. Paul knew everything. The argument that followed was explosive, a release of pent-up anger and hurt. "I did it for revenge," he admitted, his eyes blazing with a mix of pain and triumph. "How does it feel, Emily? To be cheated on?" I was speechless. The revelation that his affair was a calculated act of revenge was a blow I hadn't anticipated. The room spun around me as the magnitude of his betrayal sank in. This was not the man I married. This was someone else, someone consumed by hurt and a desire for retribution. In a whirlwind of emotion, I decided to confront Michelle. I needed answers. I needed to understand why. Why she, my closest friend, would betray me in the most unimaginable way. I found her at her apartment, the door opening to a face that was once so familiar, now marred by guilt. "Michelle, how could you?" My voice cracked with a mix of anger and heartbreak. She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "I'm sorry, Emily," she whispered. But her words were empty, void of the sincerity and warmth that once defined our friendship. The conversation that followed was a blur of accusations and tearful apologies. But no words could undo the betrayal, no apology could mend the broken trust. As I left her apartment, the finality of the situation settled in. My marriage was over, my friendship with Michelle was irreparably damaged, and my life as I knew it was in ruins. I drove aimlessly, the city lights blurring past as I tried to make sense of it all. The pain of betrayal was overwhelming, a tidal wave that swept away all the love and trust I once held dear. I was alone, adrift in a sea of betrayal and heartache, the future uncertain and dark. After my confrontation with Michelle, I sat in my car, stunned. "I always knew about you and Alex," she had said, her voice devoid of the warmth it once had. The betrayal cut deeper knowing she had been aware of my affair all along. I felt isolated, like I was in a free fall with no one to catch me. In a moment of desperation, I reached out to Alex. He had been my escape, my haven in times of turmoil. But when I called him, his voice was distant, a stark contrast to the warmth and urgency it once carried. "Emily, I've moved on," he said, his words like a cold slap. "I can't do this anymore." I felt a sharp pang in my chest, the final thread of my old life snapping. The following weeks were a blur. The strain of my personal life bled into my professional life. I couldn't focus, missing deadlines and meetings. My boss called me into his office one afternoon. "I'm sorry, Emily, but we have to let you go," he said, his eyes sympathetic yet firm. I nodded, numb. My career, something I had worked so hard for, had crumbled before my eyes. Walking out of the office that day, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. My marriage was in ruins, my affair had ended in heartbreak, my best friend had betrayed me, and now, my career was over. I was a pariah, a shadow of the person I once was. I tried reaching out to friends, but their responses were lukewarm, noncommittal. It became clear that they had chosen sides, and it wasn't mine. Whispers of my affair had spread, and I was now the topic of hushed conversations and judgmental glances. The friends I once laughed with, shared secrets with, were now just more faces in a crowd that was turning its back on me. As I sat alone in my now too quiet apartment, the reality of my situation hit me. I had lost everything that mattered to me: my husband, my lover, my friend, my job. The people I loved, the life I had built, all gone because of a series of choices I had made. I was alone, truly alone, for the first time in my life. The emptiness was overwhelming, a hollow ache that filled every corner of my being. I had gambled everything on a passion that burned bright and fast, only to be left in the dark, cold aftermath. The journey ahead was uncertain, a path shrouded in the shadows of my mistakes. The lesson was a hard one, learned through the loss of everything I held dear. The day Paul filed for divorce, it didn't come as a surprise. The papers, served coldly and formally, cited my infidelity as the cause. Each word was a nail in the coffin of our marriage, a final confirmation of its demise. I signed them in a daze, the finality of our separation sinking in with every stroke of the pen. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Sitting across from Paul in the lawyer's office, I barely recognized the man I had once loved so deeply. He was distant, his eyes void of any warmth they once held for me. The settlement left me with almost nothing: no house, no financial security, nothing but the clothes on my back and a heart full of regret. I reached out to old friends in a bid to rebuild some semblance of my former life, but the doors were firmly shut. Their words were polite, but their eyes were cold. "I'm sorry, Emily, but it's complicated," they'd say, their voices tinged with unease. The reality was clear: I was an outcast, a pariah. My affair had not only destroyed my marriage but had also severed the bonds of friendship that I had once held dear. As the days turned into weeks, the extent of my isolation became painfully clear. I wandered through the city, a ghost among the living, my past mistakes haunting me at every turn. The places I had once frequented with friends, with Paul, now served as stark reminders of what I had lost. The laughter and joy that once filled my life had been replaced by a deafening silence, a void that no amount of regret could fill. I found myself spending evenings in my small, rented apartment, a stark contrast to the home I once shared with Paul. The walls echoed with the absence of laughter, of love, of life. I'd sit by the window, watching the world go by, a world that I no longer felt a part of. The reflection in the mirror told the story of my journey: a woman who had once had everything, now stripped bare by the consequences of her choices. The lines on my face, the sadness in my eyes, were a roadmap of the pain and loss I had endured. As I sat alone, The weight of my actions pressing down on me, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me here. The affair with Alex, the betrayal of Michelle, the loss of my job, my friends, my marriage. Each choice I had made, each path I had taken, had led me to this point. In the deafening silence of my solitude, I realized the painful truth: I was the architect of my own downfall. My choices, driven by fleeting passions and selfish desires, had cost me everything. The love I had taken for granted, the friendships I had cherished, the life I had built, all gone, like smoke in the wind. As I gazed out into the night, the city lights twinkling like distant stars, I understood the harsh reality of my situation. I was alone, not just in that small apartment, but in the world. The journey ahead was mine alone to take, a path forged by the lessons of my past and the hope of redemption in my future. The road would be long, the climb steep, but it was a journey I had to take, a chance to find myself again in the wreckage of the life I had once